Good afternoon. Pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I'm joined to my right by Mario Salento, President of the AFL-CIO, a man to my left who can't turn off his cell phone, but is a great union leader, Danny Donahue, from President of CSEA, and to Mario's right, Michael Mulgrew, President of the United Federation of Teachers. The Supreme Court came down with yet another decision today on what's called the Janus case, the Janus decision. My thoughts are simple and I think obvious. The Trump administration was elected with a very specific political agenda, and this Supreme Court seems committed to enforcing the president's agenda through their court rulings. It's that simple. We saw it with the travel ban yesterday, the travel ban decision, which was clearly Islamophobia, masquerading as national security. And today with the Janus decision, the Trump administration has been very clear. They are anti-union. They represent a part of this country that is anti-union. They represent big business that is anti-union. And the Janus decision is an attempt to break unions. Here in New York, we believe the exact opposite. We support the labor movement. The president ran saying he supports middle-class workers and middle-class people. That's what he said in the campaign. Well, the entity that built the middle class is the labor movement. The entity that protects the middle class is the labor movement. If you really cared about the middle class, if you really cared about working men and women, you'd be supporting the labor movement. You wouldn't be trying to destroy it. And that's all Janus is about, trying to destroy the labor movement. Governmentally, what it does for them is it destroys a political entity that they tend to disagree with. Private sector would love to destroy unions because collective bargaining equalizes the bargaining table. That's what collective bargaining essentially does. It gives the employees a collective voice against management. And it means it's a more fair negotiation. And they're against collective bargaining. They're against empowering the employees in the discussion. They're against empowering the employees in their role in government. The court's argument that people have a First Amendment right and they shouldn't have to fund the union if the union has a different political opinion is just hogwash. To use a different term. There's already a provision where a member's political dues can be returned if they disagree with the political opinion of the union. So that is nonsensical. This was purely political. That's what it was always about. And the Supreme Court has once again delivered for the president on his political ideology. That's not the role of the Supreme Court. There's supposed to be a check and balance, as we all learned, as opposed to a rubber stamp. Today was announced that Justice Kennedy is retiring. I would urge the Senate Democrats to be very careful before they confirm another judge. They should not confirm another partisan judge, another political judge. We want a justice of the Supreme Court who is fair and objective and open-minded and makes a decision on the facts of the case as opposed to coming with a predisposition and a political ideology that they either bring themselves or they're transferring from the president. The Supreme Court was not supposed to be a political arm of the President of the United States. So I would strongly urge them not to confirm any justice unless we know it is a fair and objective nonpartisan, non-biased justice. And I would go a step further and say they shouldn't confirm any justice until after the election. And let's see what the people of this country say in the election. And if the Republicans balk, say, well, this is exactly your rationale when you wouldn't confirm a justice for President Obama. You said, well, it was close to an election. Let's see what the people say. Well, we're close to an election now, and let's see what the people say about what the direction of this country and the actions of this president. In New York, we're going to do everything we can to protect the labor movement. We're going to start today by signing an executive order whereby the lists and information of government employees will not be provided through the FOIL mechanism to entities that request it. This is part of a political movement. There are groups that are trying to harass government employees and harass government employees into leaving the union. There have been incidents of this across the country, and we're not going to subject government employees to a political organization's harassment. So I'm going to sign an executive order now that keeps the lists of government employees private and protects their personal privacy. I'm also going to be proposing legislation that affords that same protection to all government employees in the state, local governments, et cetera, not just employees that are covered by a state executive order, which is primarily binding on state agencies as opposed to local agencies. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Mario Salento, President of the AFL-CIO.
Thank you, Governor. And let me just say, first and foremost, Governor, I want to thank you on behalf of the 2.5 million members of the state AFL-CIO, not just public sector workers, but private sector workers, building trades workers from Buffalo to Brooklyn to Long Island and everywhere in between. This is another example of your dedication and commitment to organized labor and to working men and women. And I just have to say that commitment and that relationship and that friendship is more important now than ever before, because as the governor has outlined, the labor movement is under attack in this country like never before. But working men and women in the middle class are as well, whether you're union members or not. The labor movement has the bullseye on its back. And the reason for that is this. The right-wing conservative ideologues the governor alluded to understand one very simple truth, and that's this, that when the labor movement is strong and vibrant and successful, we not only improve the lives of our members, but we raise the standard of living and the quality of life for all working men and women. And that's really the key here. We have the target, but everyone is affected. And that's what we really do need to keep in mind today. Yes, it affects organized labor particularly. But let me just say this, Governor, and that is that, you know, we talk about relationships, we talk about working together. The governor said at his State of the State address in early January, and I'm paraphrasing here, the governor said that day in his remarks that he would work as hard as he can to ensure that the labor movement is as strong tomorrow as it is today. 3 months later, we passed legislation. The governor led the fight to mitigate some of the damage from this decision today. Here we are 3 months later, and the governor is taking action again on an executive order and also pushing forward on legislation. And Governor, those actions speak louder than words. So we do really appreciate that. And I will just say this, Michael and Danny and all labor leaders across the state, public sector, private sector, and building trades, we need to remember one thing. This is not a surprise what happened today. This, we understood that the Friedrichs case a few years ago would have came to pass, but unfortunately, Justice Scalia passed away. So we've been ready for this, talking to our members, educating them, activating them to continue to pay their dues and be active. So we know that. And we also know, one other thing, and that is that we're all in it together. As I said, private sector and building trade, supporting our brothers and sisters. So we will continue to do that, Governor. We will work with you from now for as long as it takes to continue to do this. And thank you, really, Governor, for setting a standard for every elected official in this country, for your commitment and your dedication to working men and women. Thank you, Governor.
Thank you for the kind words.
Well done.
Danny Donahue, President of CSEA, AFSCME, 1,000.
Yes, let me say this. There have been times when me and the governor have not always agreed.
Have to?
Yes, I
Oh.
think it's something like that. But let me be just as candid about it. When the governor does the right thing, we're more than willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with him. His statements about where he stands with labor make sense. This state was built by labor. It is a labor state. The men and women in this state benefit from the works of labor unions around the country, let alone in New York. We've raised the standards for everything from safety and health to food to making sure that people have retirements and pensions. We recognize that we're all in this together, as Mario says, because there is no attack on the private sector or the public sector. It's an attack on labor, because if these people can get away with this, everybody's up for grabs. And the real frightening part about it from our perspective is the fact that who are you attacking? The nurse in the hospital, the school crossing guard, the cafeteria worker, the person who drives your children to school every day in a bus. You're attacking them because they don't have a voice. As the governor pointed out, there is laws in place now to protect those people if they disagree with us. But more importantly, what these people want is that let's give up. You can get your money back. You don't need to be part of the union. What do you give up? You give up your voice. You give up the right to disagree with the boss. You give up the right to argue with the governor of the state of New York when you have to. But you give up the basic freedom of any labor person to stand up and be part of a collective that says, we want to change. There are no changes in this country because one individual just stood up and said yes. It's because people stand up every day. The idea of NAFTA and all the other conglomerates around the world, when you look at what people are paid around the world, some of the companies we deal with every day would still like to give you $1 a day to pay your wages and not pay your pensions, because in the old days, everybody had a pension. Now it's a 401k if you're lucky, and don't count that as luck. We're all in this fight together, as the governor said. But let me make it clear. On behalf of the 300,000 men and women who every day take care of the public in this state, we intend to be around for another 108 years. CSEA has been around for 108 years. Not because of agency fees, but because we are a voice for those members, and we give them the opportunity to stand up and fight for what they believe in. And joining with the governor, we'll fight anybody for this, including that lunatic in the White House. Because if his idea of freedom is just do what I tell you, I know some people named Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin who he could have mentored everywhere he goes. If that sounds kind of crude, let me be kind about it. I'm not going to be obscene about him. But I do know he can't be just let off the hook by saying, oh, he's misunderstood. Well, he's not this, he's not that. He's a liar. Imagine this. The best thing we can say about the President of the United States is that he lies. We shouldn't condone it. We should hold him accountable and fact check him for everything he does. But we in the labor movement, especially in the public employee side, are ready to fight him and anybody else that comes down the street to protect our rights and all the things we fought for over the years. We're not giving up to anybody, and we're proud to stand shoulder to shoulder with the governor, as they said, to make sure that nobody takes us for granted. Nobody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Michael Mulgrew?
Earlier at the beginning of this year, or the school year, I know that there were groups of us talking about what was the strategy for us in New York this year. And there were many conversations about, first and foremost, protecting New York from some of the craziness. And at that point, we had all sorts of ideas of different things that would be coming from the Washington, D.C. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today. But in those conversations, it was clear it was first, have a understanding of all of us working together about the role of New York and the importance that we're going to play in the national debate moving forward. And then make sure that we are also not just playing defense, that we have a way to constantly push out things that are good and things that should be happening on really what is the most important thing, which is protecting and growing communities. And I can't thank this governor enough, because you have obviously kept to your word. You have led by actions, and it is important that New York is here today, the first state reacting and taking governmental action against this horrendous decision from the Supreme Court. And let's talk about the Supreme Court at this moment. Justice Kagan put it nicely today. They have weaponized the First Amendment. And as the governor said, the Supreme Court was supposed to be the one body above politics at all times. And it is clear at this point that it has become perverted and twisted by a political group of people who have been scheming for years to take this country in a direction that they believe works for them and them only. And this is our fight as we move forward. And I know 30 years from now, when UFT members are teaching in our schools, they will teach about what happened at this point in time in this country. And they will talk about how labor unions stood up, about how communities came together, and about the elected officials who said, we're not going to have this. And they will teach about the Supreme Court justices who perverted the entity that was supposed to protect and be the fairness for this entire country. So I look forward, as we move forward in this fight, to making sure that New York is out there, loud and proud, and more importantly, that we continue to kick these people where they deserve to be kicked. And as I promised my mother numerous times, I will pray for all of them when they're burning in hell.
I'm going to sign the executive order. The executive order is signed. Thank you. Everybody knows my counsel. I missed in the introductions Alfonso David. I want to thank him for his hard work on this issue. As we said, we'll also be pursuing legislation that applies this to every government in the state. Questions?
What's your legal authority to this? Can you enumerate? Maybe Mr. David can do it.
Sure. Under the Public Officers Law, Section 87, public employers are allowed to withhold personal private information of employees, but is permissive, is not mandatory. We have, as an employer, the right to withhold that information under these circumstances.
Doesn't that apply to Social Security numbers, other really personal information, not names?
It would. It would apply to home addresses, personal information, Social Security numbers, phone numbers. All of that information would be redacted if it's requested pursuant to FOIL.
So you can still get the name, you just can't get the phone number.
Correct. The fact that you're a public employee is public information. Your home address, your telephone number is not.
Isn't that already exempt?
No, it's not. Again, it's permissive as opposed to mandatory.
Just so we're clear, this isn't going to apply to like salary and job titles, stuff that reporters would normally ask for?
No, we're focused primarily on information that would identify an employee's home, personal information, phone number. The evidence that we've seen from across the country is that union workers are being targeted. People are going to their homes, calling them at home, getting their cell phone numbers to try to convince them not to participate in the union. And that information we're going to protect from disclosure.
Has this information ever been given out in the past?
It has.
Under this administration?
I would have to double check. I would assume that under certain circumstances it has been, but we would have to check.
And can we have a copy of the executive order after the
Sure.
The relevant government information will be provided. Government employee name, salary, title, that the public has a right to know. The personal information will not be. Home phone, address, etc.
Just to clarify, this only applies, the executive order only applies to state entities?
State employees, teachers, CSEA members, PEF members. It does not apply to local governments. That's where we need legislation. It doesn't stop Nassau County from providing information or New York City from providing information. That has to be done by legislation.
Is it exempting providing this information in bulk, or is somebody still request an individual's information?
It's in bulk or on an individual basis. If you want to call 100,000 times, you're not going to get the 100,000 employees. You can get the relevant information from a governmental point of view. Andrew Cuomo, governor, salary, start date, that the public has a right to know, they're public employees, but not my personal information to contact me or come to my home.
Governor, do you share Mr. Donahue's opinion, the analogy likening the president to Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin?
I think Mr. Donahue expressed himself forthrightly and clearly. I have political differences with this president, no doubt. This Janus case, the Muslim ban, what's going on with immigrants, the SALT attack on New York, which frankly, for me, was the point of departure. That was an economic attack on 12 states, New York #1. That was a hostile act, a hostile political act. So I have significant political differences with the president. Okay? Thank you.